Folks, and welcome to another edition of the Real Estate Tea with Nikki and NYC. And I am she. I'm your host, Nikki Thomas, licensed associate real estate broker with the Corcoran Group. And this evening, we're going to be looking at stats for sales and rentals for Manhattan and Brooklyn during the month of December 2024. So remember, these stats are always looking 1 month back because that's how our data collection works. So let's get started. But first, let me have a little sip of this cacao tea. If you're looking for a low-cal way to enjoy yourself, some hot chocolate, cacao tea is the way to go, let me tell you. All right, so let me pull up my little slides. Let me drop myself down here as per usual, and let's get started. So we're going to start off with Manhattan. So as you can see, December was a really strong month compared to last year around the same time. Now, even though contracts signed were down on a month-over-month basis, that's pretty typical of seasonality. But look at that. Sales were up 19% compared to December of 2023. That was likely reflecting the fact that we did see a bit of a decrease in terms of interest rates after the election. And there was also there was activity that just kind of like sales activity had actually gotten a bit frozen in advance of the election. And once the election occurred, people felt more comfortable transacting when it came to real estate. So that's part of why we're seeing such a huge increase year over year. So the interest rates plus the election finally being over. All right, price per square foot. As you can see, another big increase on a year-over-year basis, as well as a pretty, not too shabby increase on a month-over-month basis. Now, this is not necessarily because of properties becoming more expensive overall, but rather because we saw more luxury and new development sales happen compared to the prior year and compared to the prior month. Now, look at this in terms of active listings, all right? Down compared to December of last year, up ever so slightly compared to November, but the year over year change is really significant. This is one of the lowest levels we've seen in quite some time. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of impact this is going to have on the market going forward if we kind of stay at this low inventory level. Typically, we do see an increase in inventory come the new year, so we'll definitely see some month-over-month increases, but it'll be really interesting to see what those year-over-year numbers are going to look like for the month of January. All right, so now let's hop across the East River to Brooklyn. Now, Brooklyn, different story. You can see when it comes to contracts signed, they were down quite significantly compared to last year this time, as well as compared to November. A huge part of the reason for this is just inventory has just... It's been pretty disappointing, throughout the borough, despite what you might be seeing here with active listings. So as you can see, we're going to skip a section here. I'm going to go to the active listings. So even though inventory was higher than it was last year this time, it was down month over month, and overall inventory levels are still at some lows that we haven't seen in quite some time. So this is very discouraging for a lot of would-be buyers. Price per square foot, that increase is being led by some of the same reasons that we saw in Manhattan, more new development sales, more expensive sales happening. So that's primarily what's behind that shift, and also fewer sales that occurred that were below $1 million. So again, we're not necessarily seeing that property is getting more expensive. This is more reflecting the kinds of sales that happened for the month of December. Okay, so now we are going to switch gears and look at rentals, starting with Manhattan. So signed leases, more or less the same as they were last year this time, down compared to November, but that's something that we would expect to see as part of seasonality. Usually, as I've said in past instances of these, the colder the weather, usually the colder the rental market. Median rent did tick up just a bit on a year-over-year basis, but was actually flat month over month, so good news for renters. Now, active listings. Okay, and again, we're really going to want to keep an eye out on inventory in January because as you can see, there was a pretty steep decline compared to last year this time, and we also saw a decline compared to the prior month. So January is typically a quiet season, but if this low inventory situation persists, then we could see some kind of unexpected impacts in terms of prices and whatnot. All right, and speaking of prices, let's look at the average rent. So as you can see, there was still some increases, which I know is, might be a little bit kind of confusing because it's like, wait a minute, didn't you just say that they were pretty much flat? But remember here, we're just looking at, category, and these numbers sometimes will be a little bit what we call noisy, meaning you see like a lot of movement in terms of in the stats, depending upon kind of what was rented, right? So if you see, like, for example, with 3 bedrooms, if there were more luxury properties that were rented compared to like the prior year, then you're going to see like a pretty big bump once you break them out in like category basis. But anyways, you can see studios, 3,410, up 3% year over year. 1 bedrooms, 4,662, up 4% year over year. 2 bedrooms, 6,706, up 2% year over year. And 3 bedrooms at 10,950. Now, don't look at these numbers and think, oh God, I don't have almost $11,000 to rent a 3 bedroom Manhattan, so ergo I can't rent a 3 bedroom Manhattan. Remember, this is an average. Averages are easily skewed. This is just kind of giving you a sense of overall market trends. All right, so there's plenty of stuff out there that is less than $11,000. It's just the type of inventory is going to be quite different. All right. Okay, so again, hopping over to the East River to see what's going on in Brooklyn. So Brooklyn saw some healthy activity compared to the prior year. Again, we also see that month over month decline, which is pretty typical of seasonality. The median rent also inched up a bit, both year over year and a month over month basis. But as you can and look at average listings, even though they were down quite a bit on a month over month basis, they were higher than they were last year this time, just a little bit, but it was just enough to encourage people to get out there and look for a new apartment. So I think we might also be seeing the impact of a number of would-be buyers who didn't end up buying in the months of November and December, who decided to instead seek new leases. So that might be part of what we're seeing here as well. All right, and we're going to look at those averages for Brooklyn as well. So, as you can see, studios stood at $3,185. Again, remember, there's a lot of doorman studios in Brooklyn. That's what's bringing this number up. So, if you're seeing this and thinking, oh my God, why does a studio cost very nearly, pretty close to what one costs in Manhattan? That's what you're looking at. If you're that's the reason. If you are interested in walk-ups and elevator buildings as opposed to doorman buildings, this number is going to be a lot lower in Brooklyn. Okay, for 1 bedrooms, the average stood at 3,780, so that was up 7% year over year. 2 bedrooms, 4,942, up 2% year over year. And 3 bedrooms, look at that, 5,666, actually down a bit year over year. So not necessarily the case that 3 bedrooms are getting cheaper, although that would be wonderful, but probably more so has to do with the type of 3 bedrooms that were rented, meaning we probably saw fewer 3 bedroom rentals happening in more expensive buildings. All right. So what are our takeaways from all of this? When it comes to rentals, I think what we can see once January's numbers are in is that, I expect to see some month over month declines. I would actually kind of be surprised if I saw a month over month increase because, again, as I said, as the weather gets colder, usually so does the rental market. So probably we are going to see a month over month decline, but it will be interesting to see kind of what happens on a year over year basis. It could be more competitive in Manhattan compared to last year due to that lower inventory. But at the same time, though, that lower inventory could also suppress interest. So who knows, it might balance out. Brooklyn, renters could potentially have an easier time than last year if inventory continues to increase a bit. But renters are not in the driver's seat. I'm in no way, shape, or form saying, claiming that we're going to be looking at a renter's market. No, like still going to be challenging. And actually, to that point, higher interest rates, because right now, I think as of today, interest rates like dip down just a shade below 7%, but they're still relatively high. So if more buyers are looking at that and thinking, I'm not going to roll with that, then, then they're going to stay in the rental market, and that could actually make rents more competitive in both boroughs. Now, when it comes to sales, things are very, very, very up in the air because of the new being at the same level as they were roughly around last year this time, because the market has adjusted psychologically to the higher interest rate environment that we're experiencing. But the Fed is not expected to cut rates for the next several months. As a matter of fact, they just held their meeting today and they decided to hold steady. And the reason why that's the case is because they have inflation concerns and concerns that the new administration's economic policies could increase inflationary pressures. So that on things in terms of, the market mojo, as it were. Regardless, given that rents are staying relatively high, they've just been and inventory has been increasing, and not so much Manhattan, Brooklyn, yeah, but the rent versus buy equation may actually still tilt pretty strongly in favor of buying for some folks. So we likely will still see some people just say, like, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to go ahead and try to buy my first place. Remember, it's always a personal case-by-case decision. And speaking of which, just to wrap things up, I do have a seminar coming up, planning for home ownership. It's going to be on February 12th. Be on the lookout for more information about that. And also, if you want more information about it in advance of me sending out emails and such, just send me a DM and I will make sure to hook you up with the linkage once it's ready. All right, so thank you so much. It was great to see you. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time. That's all I got for you. Bye.